So, thanks a lot. So I was going to try to provide a few comments on the recently adopted woodland caribou policy for Alberta, and Rick Blackwood made mention of this right at the start. So I've got a few slides, kind of speaks to a bit of the background and what it's about, and maybe approximately where we're at. So it's not news that there are some issues around the management and persistence of woodland caribou in Alberta and in other parts of Canada. They're threatened in Canada and Alberta, of course. Threatened as a result of reduced distribution, in some cases substantially reduced distribution. Populations in decline, here or there across the nation. And it's not melodramatic, I think, to say that caribou could disappear from Alberta in our lifetime. Various modeling results have demonstrated that. What are the issues? Well, I think it's fairly well demonstrated that the risk to caribou populations is tied to habitat changes due to human developments on the ground and to natural disturbances, forest fires being the most notable. And that actions would be required, or will be required, to avoid the loss of many caribou populations in the province. In addition, a looming issue for us is that there are unrolling various federal recovery planning and action requirements. We're all aware of the proposed recovery strategy for boreal caribou, and so those are requirements under the Federal Species at Risk Act, and are one of the things that we need to pay a lot of attention to in the next while. So what has Alberta done? We've been working on caribou for a long time in Alberta, together with partners and stakeholders and interested individuals. But in the last, basically in 2010, culminating in the late spring of 2011, what the province has tried to do is create sort of once and for all an all-encompassing provincial policy statement with respect to woodland caribou. We did that, and it was announced with a press release in June of 2011. And I'm sure many of you have seen the policy document. It is available on the SRD website, and if you're having trouble finding it, catch me after, and I'll get the right link, web link to you. The policy is a high-level document. It's only on 2 pages. It describes broad intent. It bounds that intent and provides some examples of the sorts of activities that would be envisioned under the terms of the policy. But it is a high-level policy. It does build on previous work that has taken place in the province. For old-timers in the room, sort of, I think serious caribou inventory and planning work began in about 1980 in Alberta, and it has ramped up ever since then. And as I think Rick alluded to, there's been a tremendous volume of work that has occurred in the province. But so, we feel that the policy builds on some of that previous work. Certainly, it takes a lot of guidance from the approved Alberta Woodland Caribou Recovery Plan. So this was a provincial plan built in response to provincial legislation. It was finalized in very early 2005 and received government approval in that same year. Similarly, the Alberta Species at Risk status report or statusing system has resulted in 2 status reports for woodland caribou in the province. The first being the status report that was created in 2001. This report was recently updated in 2010 with a lot more data and information. And I think it's a pretty good document, and I would, for those interested, I would direct you again to the SRD website to take a look at that. There has been, a lot of, again, as Rick indicated, there has been a lot of sound science work, we believe, and a tremendous amount of more detailed monitoring, which has occurred in Alberta. Certainly there is science findings from other jurisdictions also, which have come to bear on the policy and our state of knowledge. And the policy certainly was was subject to a lot of dialogue with various individuals, in particular the multi-stakeholder Alberta Caribou Committee, where we debated the merits of going this way or that way in the strategy or in the policy for some time. Been quite a bit of discussion with First Nations as the strategy was coming to conclusion, and with various others. And so the Alberta's Caribou policy was approved by Cabinet, by Alberta Provincial Cabinet in June of 2011, and in doing so, it has become really the first Alberta government-wide document, I guess, that has been endorsed in Alberta over these 30 or so years. So what are some of the key elements of the policy? And I've got a couple slides here that will run through sort of the high points. Essentially, it commits to self-sustaining caribou populations in the province. It indicates an objective or a desire to strive towards stabilizing, recovering, and then sustaining caribou populations in Alberta. It will focus on the current populations. So as in contrast, I suppose, to having goals and objectives for historical caribou range in the province. Historical, but currently unoccupied. And it will focus on the delivery of, it speaks to focusing on the delivery of effective actions at the level of individual caribou ranges and populations, and having actions tailored to individual caribou ranges and populations. And we'll dwell on that again in just a minute. It makes reference to reasonable actions being called for, and that's a matter of opinion and definition, I guess. But there is a statement in the policy that actions need to be reasonable. In terms of activities on the ground, and again, I'll hit the high points here of the higher level categories of things. There's only 3, 4, 5 kind of things that one would do with respect to recovering and sustaining caribou, and I think they're probably fairly self-evident. We would attempt to maintain good caribou habitat where it still exists. We would attempt to restore caribou habitat where restoration of habitat is needed. We would certainly attempt to mitigate any negative effects of new developments that will occur on caribou ranges. Developments will occur on caribou ranges. We would need to reduce or manage predation until habitat is restored and caribou ranges provide better conditions for the animals. For virtually all of the caribou populations in Alberta right now, we're in a situation where mortality is outstripping the ability of animals, of the populations, to renew themselves, to replace individuals. And trees only grow so fast, and there is a fair bit of habitat disturbance on almost all of our caribou ranges. So, in the interim, in order to have a caribou population to profit from what we might do on the habitat side, in the interim, some management of excessive mortality will be required. The policy makes it clear that isn't the focus of the work. So predator management, say, or other mortality management tools are not to be the end in themselves, rather a means to get to a better situation in the end. In addition, the policy speaks to a desire to manage increases in other prey species. So again, as obviously with predator management, this can be a high-profile sort of an activity. I think, in my opinion, I think the intention wouldn't be to, a priori manage prey species to zero or to very low levels, but rather, how I would tend to frame it is to appropriately manage the increases in productivity of those prey species that we have seen, or that we might be seeing into the future as a result of habitat change or as a result of implementation of predator management. If you manage predators to benefit caribou, it tremendously benefits other prey species, maybe at a greater rate than caribou, so have to deal with that factor. And one of the other main key elements reflected in the strategy is the need for stakeholder involvement. There needs to be significant dialogue with people on the ground, with interested parties, rights holders, not the least of which is First Nations. The policy, feels that implementation of caribou recovery in the province is a shared responsibility, and that significant partnerships will be required. Good, functional, productive partnerships. So all of that, between government, industry, First Nations, other publics and whatnot. There are things that government can do well, I think, and there are things that industry can do well. Some things industry can't really do, some things government can't really do. Some things that the public need to contribute to significantly. So all those spheres need to come together in a cohesive and an appropriate manner. The policy anticipates partners will contribute resources to the endeavor, and it anticipates funding will be available from partners as we go through time. And to date, there are various willing partners that have come forward, and although we are not yet to the stage, I think, on any of the caribou ranges where we have we're in very early stages, of trying to create a direction and a coherent plan to go forward. But nevertheless, there are a variety of willing partners that are coming forward with productive activities or proposals for productive activities, on one range or the other. Certainly, the policy recognizes that Aboriginal rights need to be respected, and it intends to provide opportunities for involvement of those folks. Okay, so implementation, and as I just indicated, we're at very early stages right now. We're still trying to, get ourselves organized, and there will be much more to come on this in the next months, I think. But as in terms of overarching principles, again, I mentioned range level planning and implementation would be the focus, and that would begin with with a paradigm to tailor the needs of recovery actions, tailor those to the needs of individual caribou populations and ranges. It would begin with some sort of detailed range assessment and planning, and certainly dialogue amongst the affected parties. Now, I mentioned we've been doing caribou things in Alberta to a greater or lesser extent since about 1980. Certainly in the last 10 years we have, I'm going to say in the last 15 years, we've done all kinds of planning initiatives and prepared various documents and whatnot. So with respect to detailed range assessments, I guess I would frame that I think where we are headed is to go on a fast track and not on a slow track, and perhaps not repeat some of the experiences of the past, all of them well-intentioned, I think, but often pretty cumbersome and pretty slow. So I think the intention here would be to be nimble. I think Rick mentioned that also, be nimble, be responsive, and be prompt about all of this. A key aspect of the implementation thought process would be that management actions might vary, or almost certainly will vary, both within and between ranges. All of the caribou ranges and portions thereof are not equivalent. Perhaps with respect to the demographic situation that caribou are in, the nature of the landscape, the nature of industrial footprint that's currently there, and industrial footprint that might be anticipated into the future. So, it calls for, again, fine-tuning the prescription for management actions to the situation. And to be clear, that might mean that the exact action doesn't occur on all portions of a given caribou range, even because some of these caribou ranges are large, and so you may need to be quite clever about what we do. I think to go back to an earlier slide, I think the one action that would be fairly predominant or evident on a broad brush would be relief from mortality, excessive mortality. That's something we're pretty much going to have to do, I think, almost everywhere that we intend to retain the given caribou population. So the other thing that implementation actions need to be concerned about are opportunities and constraints. There are a variety of opportunities at all sorts of levels on different caribou ranges, and there are a variety of constraints. So those things we need to take account of when we're rolling out recovery actions. I mentioned before, we feel that that this whole endeavor is a shared responsibility between government, industry, and the public, and that goes again, with respect to the delivery of recovery actions on the ground. There are some things that government can do. There are some things that industry can do, and so we need to. There's some things that the public must be tied into. So that's an overarching thought process here. The actions need to be coordinated and effective, so not one-offs, not one company doing something, another company doing something else, and government doing the third thing, and none of the things interacting or relating. That won't work so well. It's probable that we would have to work with our industrial partners to adapt industrial practices in some cases. And certainly, and this maybe gets back to the comment on reasonable actions. We need to consider environmental, economic, and social values in this whole package. That would be one of the responsibilities of government for sure. One of the other things that certainly needs to occur in implementation, needs to continue, is monitoring. And I think the categories of things to be monitored would be, caribou population certainly, and we would argue with respect to demographic rates, their distribution, and distribution of animals, and range occupancy within ranges. Alberta has done a lot of work on that to date. In the early years, it was collective work, government and industry. In the last number of years, it's been predominantly government that has looked after that. A lot of those information are summarized in the 2010 status report, and again, I would recommend you take a look at it if you're interested. In addition, I think we need to do a much better job of monitoring caribou habitats, their occurrence, their quality, their distribution. We need to take a more considered view, I think, of monitoring and summarizing the occurrence of industrial footprint, both old historical footprint and new stuff, and certainly natural disturbances as well. So all of those monitoring results. Why do that? Well, we feel that that is necessary. That those information will be necessary to assess our recovery successes, and also certainly to enable adaptive management. Was the result of our management action as we predicted? Was it sufficient? Was it timely? And what do we need to do to change? So you need information towards informing those decisions. So I'm not sure how that shows up. I'm not going to trouble you with this too much. It's a bit of a flow chart for some of the more specific details of how we see implementation unrolling. And members of the Alberta Caribou Committee have seen this exact figure before, and I think some others have seen it also. And I'm not going to dwell on it, but basically, it's a bit of a primer, I guess, on a template for how implementation might unfurl. And so, starting at the top, implementation, as I mentioned, would take direction from the policy and the recovery plan. We would develop range-specific assessments. There would be a process with stakeholders and through dialogue to develop range-specific objectives and targets, and where we would like to head on the given ranges. In the large box, it describes sort of some of the process to describe what suite of tools would be appropriate for delivery in a given range or in portions of the range. Would we deliver predator management? Would we focus on restoration? Would we focus on habitat conservation? Things like that. Some of the side boxes there, describe the opportunity that we envision for interaction with stakeholders, with interested parties, with folks on the ground, with others. A loop for reporting. We have to be clean on whether we're getting there or not with everyone. And the whole line at the bottom is basically speaking to adaptive management. So on your left-hand side and my left-hand side, the whole business about monitoring. We need to collect information about what the results are of our management interventions. And on the research side, the right-hand chart there, certainly there is a role for continued research in the province. We would Under the terms of the policy, we would view that to be primarily research to assess the effectiveness of implementation actions. So that's where our head is at currently. You know, well, we'll talk about this, I think, quite a bit over the next couple of days, but, you know, there is a wealth of fundamental research, we believe, available on woodland caribou here and elsewhere. We believe there's a lot of information to inform going forward, but certainly we will need to, you know, evaluate if our actions are creating the results that we anticipate and that we hope for. Next steps, you know, as I mentioned, I think we're in the very early days of this still. Still kind of getting our act together. Certainly, you know, we're going to move forward, and in the next months, you're going to hear from us. Further dialogue with affected parties, for sure. And we will begin to develop and implement these range-specific recovery efforts together with partners. And finally, you know, why do all this? Certainly, you know, it is important to Alberta to demonstrate environmental leadership, and we believe that this policy is an important step to doing that, together with the recovery plan and our status updates. As well, you know, it's important to provide clear expectations for industry and for other folks on the ground and stakeholders and whatnot. I think that's it. That's it. Thank you.